Merrick, sound check Richard first.
Testing, testing.
That sound good?
Sounds okay?
Yep. And then how much? We'll both be probably here. Oh, turn on one more set of lights. Yeah, in the light. Checking, checking. 1, 2, 3. It's on. This is the one we had trouble with this morning. Try it again. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing this mic. 1, 2, 3. Check, check. 1, 2, 3. There it comes. That's better. Hey, Noah, could you put on this row of lights? I think it's row 1 or 2. If people could find a seat, we can begin from, obviously, London and the shires around about. That's partly what also drew them here, because as people who love particular pieces of land, and the people who live there, they didn't want to sit over in a room in England and imagine things. They wanted to stand here with us and listen to what we imagine and what are the purposes of this place and this corner on Okanagan and Peachy. And tonight I'll pass out to you little sheets of paper that say church gardens and parking lot, let's do this, a reference to this morning's message, and then 3 questions. What do you like about the outside? What do you not like about the outside? We've already got a weeds thing being spoken. And then, what ideas do you have? And then these will be things that I spend time thinking about on my own, writing it down. And we'll all do that. And then we'll collect these so that we have reference points for the night. And then there'll be a discussion about these different things. And when you write down your ideas, you know, if there's 3 things I like, put your favorite thing on top. So number 1, I really like the grass because there's room to stand. So try and do them in a bit of an order, especially if you're going to list 10 or 11 things for each category. Try to do it with like 3 or 4 or something like that. The reason we're here is because Leo and Linda, when was this church started? 1922. And can anyone from Wenatchee Brethren Baptist just raise your hand? So we're here because these 5 and others, a while back, about 100 years ago, did things like this, where they met and wondered and prayed, and in time made sacrifices to bring to pass this building on this corner. So I'm not only thankful that the 5 of you are here, the rest of us are indebted to what your church did and is still doing, your grandparents in particular, to make this possible. Hand dug the hole with shovels, and we still have the pictures to show it, but we believe you, even without pictures. So that's one reason we're here, because of the past and the present. But we're also here because we're trying to imagine the future. In 100 years, what would people say about what we imagined and then what we did with the gift of this place and the way the church is trying to serve the wider parish? Those are questions that we are beginning to ask. And then Richard and Claire, we've had a few days together. They stayed with my in-laws up in Leavenworth. Claire made dinner for us last night in my empty house because I've been starving for months. And you treated us to a feast. They're going to be in Seattle just a little bit, also meeting some folk. But you've been gracious in coming so far for this project to help us imagine. And as I open with a prayer, and they're learning I do open-eyed prayers, the clearest thing I see is you. In gratitude for this adventure you've joined us in some capacity. And at the end of the night, it's not like we're going to take everything and find a way to do everything. That's impossible. But this is what's happening in your imaginations. And what do you hope happens? And what do you hope not happens? And then they take all this home, imagine, talk, and send us some ideas. Those are coming in the future. So, with those pieces of history, present realities, and future hopes, let's pray with our eyes open. Lord, thank you for each person in this room. Thank you for the cloud of witnesses we can't see, cheering us on. Thank you for children we've not yet met, who I pray sit in these seats and play outside. What are you doing to help us create with you in the chaos, in the glory, in the wonder of this place on earth? We ask these questions and look forward to the discussion you inspire. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, take it away.
Thank you, Matt, for that introduction. So I'll try not to talk too long this afternoon. It's not something I'm always very good at, keeping it short. But as Matt says, what we really want to do, the purpose of this afternoon, is to really find out from you what you feel is important about this place, what's significant, what's its character, how do you relate to it, as Matt says, what do you enjoy about it, what perhaps doesn't work so well. And we want all your amazing ideas for what we might do in the gardens and the precinct around the church. So what I've got here is just really some ideas, some concepts, some images, most of which are work that we've done ourselves, which I hope will spark a conversation. So we want to have an informal about your interaction with the external spaces, your ideas for how we could make them better. I'll just flick through just a quick bit of background about us as a practice. So we're a practice of 10 landscape architects. So landscape architects, if you've never come across one, we work just like architects, but we're outdoors. So anything without a roof, someone once put it, we get involved with. So small private gardens to large public spaces. And these sort of projects in these sort of contexts we really love, because it's where the sacred and the secular come together. They're public spaces, but they're also very private, intimate spaces as well. They're rich spaces. They provide a setting for buildings and a context for all sorts of activities to happen. So we're super excited about being here and starting to think about this project. And we've spent the last couple of days really on that fact-finding mission. So we were here yesterday doing a site survey, Claire and I, looking at all the existing site, the existing planting, getting to know what's here, and really the kind of physical and biological attributes of the site, if you like. And today was really fascinating to be here for the 2 services in the morning, to meet quite a lot of you, and to see what goes on, the slight chaos of the services, the children's activities, and just to see how you use the outdoor spaces during the services. So we're a practice of 10 landscape architects. We're based in the UK. We're in sort of Worcestershire, Herefordshire border, which is sort of bang in the middle, essentially. And we occupy this little courtyard space, which is attached to a rather nice Michelin-starred restaurant. So we have these wonderful smells wafting across our courtyard in this former agricultural building. It was actually a pigsty originally, which some would say was an appropriate thing. So that's our little team there having a brainstorm. And we actually work next door to a vegetable kitchen and flower garden, which we helped to design, which is a constant source of inspiration. Oh, okay. So, and we get involved in all sorts of projects, as I say, large and small. The common theme tends to be historic landscapes, working around historic buildings, whether it's sort of conservation or more often sort of more contemporary interventions in those landscapes and garden spaces. We've worked in a number of, these are just sort of slightly random examples, but centre in the top, that's Exeter Cathedral. So we worked on the sort of refurbishment and reimagining of all of the spaces around the cathedral as a key public space in the city. Top right is actually the American Cemetery in Cambridge, which was a Olmsted Brothers project, which we worked on to create a new visitor centre within an ancient woodland context. Queen's Chapel of the Savoy, bottom left, Gardens for the Royal Horticultural Society, bottom centre, and the most recent project, bottom right, is the garden we did for the Chelsea Flower Show this May, just gone, which was for a wonderful Christopher Wren church called St James's in Piccadilly, which was a show garden at Chelsea. And we'll a bit more of that later. But so that's just by way of a little introduction on us. We've just now put together, as I say, some images, mostly of our work, which we thought is really just a basis to spark some ideas in you and to start a conversation and a discussion around some of the things that we might be thinking about as we develop the plans for these spaces. So obviously we're very interested in aesthetics and beauty, and we hope all our work is beautiful, but some of the ingredients that go into that we might want to think about. Planting, obviously we're learning fast about the plants in this context. Your native plants, your ornamental plants that grow, the seasons, the cold, the heat, and how the plants respond to that. But thinking about maintenance, so low maintenance, top right is the RHS gardens. We worked on the rose gardens, so lots of quite colourful and imaginative planting, some interesting plant pairings in terms of maintenance, companion planting, but actually quite low maintenance in terms of what's in there, working around existing trees. We wonder whether water might be part of this design here. So on the left is a children's garden we designed at Hampton Court Palace, where we've used jets of water that come out of the ground. You can switch them off so they disappear completely, so they're completely safe and they're very flexible. And the children really relate well to playing in them. They actually bring their swimming trunks and make a day of it. Or whether that's a more naturalistic piece of water, a pond, or that sort of stream-like quality, that could perhaps be related to sustainable urban drainage in some way. And we're always thinking about, obviously, the children in this context. Again, bottom right is the Magic Garden at Hampton Court Palace. Lots of the landscape was, as it were, playable, and we're really interested in the idea of landscapes that are playable for children with imaginations. They all have imaginations at that age that they can actually relate to and play. So they work on a number of levels in terms of the idea of children playing on a curb or a wall. We watch them all outside today, clambering over the wall and the sign. Sometimes things that weren't designed with that purpose, incidentally, have great play value, and we really enjoy that sort of idea. We've also been thinking in our visit the last couple of days about the sort of anticipation, the welcome that the outside spaces create as a kind of threshold into the church building, setting for the building, but also that idea of a welcome that the outdoor spaces give you. At the moment, you kind of come through what feels very much like the back entrance through the car park. We want to kind of build the anticipation, the excitement of coming to Trinity Church, perhaps from several blocks away. Maybe we can influence tree planting. Maybe we can influence the paving across the road, so that actually the church exerts influence beyond the actual confines of this particular block. So it's about views of the church, perhaps from further afield, perhaps framed by trees. And this is a sketch of our Chelsea garden, which is one of the new archways that will be created at St. James's, creating vistas and drawing people in this sort of welcoming way into the precinct. We want to create really comfortable spaces. Some examples here from projects in Cambridge and London and Hereford Cathedral top right, so creating spaces that feel comfortable to sit in, so you don't feel that people are sort of looking down onto you, you're in a fishbowl. Actually you feel that you're embedded in the landscape in planting, and that they're spaces you want to be in all sorts of different weathers and climate. And that sort of idea of top left of a sort of immersive landscape where you're in amongst the plants, and you have that sort of feeling of serenity and peace when you're in that sort of context, that sort of green environment. Bottom right is a church we worked on in London at St. Mary's, Islington, where, so we had some levels issues to deal with. This is where sort of comfort and function come together. We wanted to introduce playful elements into the garden. And so we actually used, for example, that curved seat is also a retaining wall, so it overcomes a practical, functional issue with the level change, but it also creates a really generous seat. And parents sit on that seat and they watch their children playing on those rather nice concrete pebbles that are sitting there as sculptural elements. We sometimes use them as sort of elegant bollards, but they're also amazing play elements for children to use their imaginations. We're also really interested in the bottom two images, creating spaces that relate very strongly to buildings. And you can see there how the paving layout, a simple paving layout, actually responds to the grid of the building, ties it all together. Landscape is often the glue in these contexts to tie things together, to create roots around spaces and make it all work as a whole. And that's what we're really trying to do in those bottom two images. Simple, low-maintenance planting, which is actually partly in this context. It's part of the university at Cambridge. Screening buildings, creating privacy, creating enclosure. And of course, we do imagine the outdoor spaces here being used as another layer, being used for prayer and contemplation, the idea of plants, again, creating that immersive, contemplative space, greenery around you. It could be so much more than there is at the moment. Whether that involves water, this sort of font-like piece bottom left. The sound of water is great for masking the sound of road noise. It creates a wonderful focal point. Whether it involves sculpture and art, we'd love to hear your thoughts about that.
Go back one picture. In the upper right-hand corner. Where's that?
Hereford Cathedral.
Yeah, that's Hereford Cathedral. That's where, when McAllister and others of us went on pilgrimage, we passed through that cathedral and thought, wow, what an integration of a building with a graveyard. I'm looking at the top right, with grass and then a circular path. And that began to make us imagine, could that ever happen even outside here? Then we met the person who knew these guys, who said, these guys did that. And we said, who are those guys? So that's where it all happened, in the upper right-hand corner, beginning to wonder about building, green, sacred. We obviously don't have a cemetery, but should we? Just getting you imagining. Keep going.
Yeah, actually, that's a very relevant example. You're quite right, because when we started that project, there was just a path straight through the middle. Everyone just went from the gates into the cloisters. And what we actually did was to introduce that circuit path. So suddenly you can walk around the space in a sort of contemplative way. You can enjoy the planting all the way around. You can access the seats which we introduced against the cathedral. We introduced some pleached trees to create that sort of sense of enclosure on that west side behind the mulberry tree, just about to see it there, that creates that sort of fourth side of the cloister, but you can see underneath. Could be relevant here. So we had grass in the middle, and then we had this really, really low creeping plant wonderfully called Mind Your Own Business, which quickly spread around the gravestones, but never and the ledger stones, but never gets more than about an inch tall. So worked really, really well in terms of a low maintenance solution.
They didn't add the cemetery. What they're good at doing, the gravestones in the cathedral were there, but there was just a straight path going through. So they took what was already there and thought, how do we work with it? And that's what you do with old buildings. How do you take what's already there and make it even more of what it could be?
Exactly. So at the moment, some of the spaces around the church here, we wondered whether they were a little bit kind of open. We want to connect to the community, we want to connect to the streets, but we also want to create that sort of sense of a sacred space that's perhaps a little better defined, particularly on that south garden. But what we don't want to do, I think, is create something that's so enclosed and defined that you have all sorts of antisocial behavior problems happening within the garden because people can't see in. So there's a balance between enclosure and definition, giving one space to have that sort of sense of immersion in the space, but actually still feel connected to the streets and the community with views in and out in terms of safety as well. So these were some thoughts about how maybe we could use a sort of green architecture, if you like, to create that sense of enclosure. We really like that top left image, which is a space we just happened to drive past in Tunbridge Wells in Sussex. And they've used these lime trees, which we know grow quite well here, to create these green arches, which allow, as I say, it creates that sense of definition and enclosure, but it allows the views in and out very successfully. More traditionally, you might just use what we call a pleached tree, so a hedge on stilts, effectively, to create a kind of raised hedge that you can see underneath. So we're quite interested in green architecture, if you like, to do that kind of thing. And there could be planting underneath, bottom left. It's a good example of that. You know, we could have planting underneath that encloses the space, but allows views through and maybe routes through as well. And we're also thinking about the car park and whether it's a very barren, concretey space, whether, you know, parking under trees is such a delightful thing to do, creates shade, keeps your cars cool, and great for biodiversity and breaking up the space. We'd love to know whether you think that would work here. And then, of course, part of the reason for having these external spaces is all to do with well-being. Lots of evidence that plants and green spaces do great things for our mental health. That's really important, particularly when combined with ideas around biodiversity and creating spaces for nature. Some examples of that here. We're sort of obviously thinking about whether some of the tree planting could be orchard-related, maybe, sort of whether having meadow would be practical. These are things we'd like to know from you. And spaces to, as we were saying before, spaces to sit, spaces to feel comfortable within the landscape, which can also be fun and playful. And some other examples of where we've worked in terms of two things, I suppose. One is interpreting the site through the landscape, so the site's history. So whether we want to introduce elements of artwork that are embedded within the gardens that talk about the site's history. These are some examples from Hampton Court Palace in the bottom, so that we were working with heraldic beasts and heraldic devices from Henry VIII's various wives, introduced actually as those animals within the landscape in quite a playful way. See the panther there, and we had a dragon's nest, top right. I don't know how many of you have seen a dragon's nest, but that's what they look like, which is a very playful element on inside, bottom left, is what it looks like, and children have a great time using that as a kind of den that they climb up into and enjoy that internal space. Or whether it's more formal kind of games, whether it's a basketball hoop, table tennis, that's all doable within the landscape. And then once we've established those sort of broad parameters, we'll be thinking about materials and detailing, and that's where a lot of the fun is in terms of really carrying the brief through that we have from you in terms of the paving, the curbs, the planting. And again, that can be quite playful. That can incorporate elements of the site's history and interpretation in lots of different ways. So the top right, for example, is Hereford Cathedral, where we actually had a timeline that tells the history of the site from sort of Norman times through to the present, just written and engraved into the stone curbs. And we found that children love going through there and will make a great diversion through the city in order to walk along these paths, because they love walking along the top of the curb and having some playful times in that way. Just to finish, some thoughts about our process. So we're obviously fact-finding at the moment, and we'll go home and have some brainstorming and thinking and drawing. I think we find that through this sort of process, from very early sketches through to more developed designs, and then thinking about also all the time, not just in 2D, but in 3D, we will end up with a developed proposal that we can come back to you and present as a more finished design and layout that hopefully is a synthesis of all your thoughts and ideas. And just to finish on, that's what a successful project, we hope, looks like. And that's the opening at Hereford Cathedral with a happy congregation. I'll leave that on that slide. And just before we kind of open it up, all right for time? I just thought it'd be useful. We had a great time this morning talking not only to you and the congregation, but also talking to some of the children engaged in godly play upstairs. And actually, they came up with some of the best ideas, I have to say. So just some thoughts that we've had over the last couple of days, talking to Matt and the team here and to you, that I thought I would just quickly run through in terms of the thinking that we're doing. Not that these are solutions in any way, but there are some ideas that start to come out and some threads that we might want to develop further. So we had a great time with the fifth graders upstairs, and we asked them what they would like to see outside, and they came up with some amazing thoughts, including, surprisingly, we thought they'd say we want plastic dinosaurs and water slides and football pitches. What they actually said was they wanted daffodils, they wanted ferns, they'd love to see some roses, lots of flowers. Great horticulturalists, clearly. They'd love a pond. They thought it'd be great to be able to do their play outside, so maybe there should be some shelter, maybe a table. So we have asked them to go away and draw some ideas up for us to copy and then send back to Matt in due course. So they were a real source of inspiration, and well done them. Just thinking about the site in terms of its various components. So starting out with the car park, we talked about tree planting. We like the idea, if there's going to be a new entrance, the sort of main entrance into the church from the car park, that it kind of needs a setting that's better than what's there at the moment. So if you imagine a door, the other side of the narthex, steps down into the car park, probably ramps as well to get step-free access into the church. Rather than arriving straight down into a concrete car park, we like the idea that perhaps we sacrifice a few parking spaces there, create a garden context so that you're coming in, the building has a garden setting, you're walking through planting, onto the stairs and into the building, and likewise as you exit. So that, I think, the thought of reorganizing the car parking a little bit, the parking bays, in order to get some more landscape, some more garden space into the car park, I think would be great. I think that there's a possibility we talked about of actually extending the car park out over the bank with a retaining wall so we can make up the spaces that we might lose against the church building on the other side. And then we had sort of radical thoughts about, well, let's imagine a world in which, not that you don't need cars, but that perhaps you could park them somewhere else, across the road. Maybe there's a solution around that. And you had that whole car park space available. What would you do with it? That's quite an exciting thought, because actually that's your biggest space and the whole precinct. So what might one do with some or all of that space if it became available? Would you play games in it? Would you have a games court? Would you have some wonderful gardens? We'd love to hear your thoughts on actually, in that context, what might you do in terms of developing that space as not a car park. Then thoughts to sort of turn to the south garden. We like the idea of, at the moment, the paths are very much functional routes into the building. We like the idea, as that Hereford example shows, that perhaps there's more of a circuit around the garden in some way, that you can walk more contemplatively around the space. Children can run around the space. There are places to stop and sit, benches set into planting, perhaps, around the outside. We've had thoughts about whether we could change the levels in some way, whether we could drop the ground a little bit to create that sense of enclosure and definition, where that central space maybe could just be grass, but it could have a labyrinth, perhaps, cut into it in some way, so you can enjoy that element as well. It kind of feels like it needs a bit more shelter and shade, so some shade trees I think would be great. We've had discussions about whether a more permanent sort of space for the coffee could be useful, so we're not always standing on the grass, but actually maybe there's a sort of slightly larger paved space that, when the grass is wet, the coffee activities could spread onto. Whether there's a canopy, a shelter of some sort, so when it's either snowing or too hot, you actually have a covered space that makes life more bearable outside, so you extend the season when you can use that garden space. Maybe that could extend into a pergola that runs around the outside, or covered cloister space that you walk underneath, so you create a little bit of sheltered space, but you're also helping to define the garden on those other three sides. So some thoughts about the south garden. You'll have lots more, I'm sure. We've also talked about play within the context of this space. Should it be a separate play garden, as it is at the moment? Or actually, would it be better to integrate it more into the south garden and the other garden spaces that we've got? Some people have felt that it's a little bit, the play as it is a bit too isolated, so that you're separated from everybody else on the south lawn, and that some parents find themselves sort of babysitting other people's children because it's sort of isolated on its own. So should it be here? Should there be play at all? Should it be integrated in the landscape as a whole? Should it be a separate sort of play area? And again, as I hope some of these examples have shown, should it be, as it were, play equipment that is there to be played on, sort of swings and climbing structures, or could it be more integrated into the landscape in terms of sort of more imaginative play on boulders, walls, curbs, and level changes and so on, as they are doing actually at the moment, sliding down banisters and so on quite happily. So thoughts about that. And if the northern garden space is not a play space, then what could it be? We've had thoughts about memorial gardens. Should it be a shade garden? A quiet garden? Again, you'll have lots of ideas about that. But I think one of the things we're keen on is that the gardens shouldn't actually feel like sort of isolated spaces, that we create a sort of wonderful setting for the whole building that allows for routes through landscape from one side to the other. So, for example, there's actually quite a generous green space on the east side of the church, which is just grass, and nobody actually, I imagine, ever uses. But actually it's wide enough to do something quite exciting with that space. There's another piece of garden that you could walk through, have a sort of quiet bench or two and some exciting planting. And we've also had some sort of slightly more radical ideas about, as I say, extending the sort of boundaries of this project a little bit further out. And could we think about the road surface outside? Could you raise the levels up and have what we might call a kind of shared surface, shared space? So perhaps you pave that bit of road on the corner, on the junction, slightly differently, to make the whole space feel more generous, make cars slow down, and some, as we might call traffic calming through the surface treatment and levels on the road. So that becomes a sort of bigger, more generous space. Could we use there are lots of examples in London we've seen of zebra crossings that are painted with a sort of art project where crossings are painted in different colors and patterns and they're not just white lines across the street. Is that something we might want to think about? So those are all thoughts and comments and conversations that we've been having today in the last few days with all of you. I think I've said enough, really, but we'd love to hear your thoughts about all of that and any other incredible ideas that we haven't yet thought about so that we can put all that together, understand how you relate to those spaces and use them and work with them, and your aspirations and excitement about those spaces hopefully distilled into the garden plan.
Robert, that's perfect for helping us to begin to imagine. You know how in church we then practice the pregnant pause, which is to hear, and that was a wonderful sermon actually, to hear from God about something happening, and then to let each person begin to imagine. So now is a time of silence, together with the sheets of paper, to write down some of the thoughts that you have. Let's take that moment. And Robert, maybe you can pass out pens on that side. I'll do sheets of paper on this side.
Who needs a pen?
Thanks, I'll give you half. That's where coffee and tea is served outside. And then, of course, the parking lot is behind us. So we're kind of imagining those three places. So North Garden, South Garden. These are not official names, just temporary, and parking lot. Do you need one? have just the handheld mic, so as people comment, I can just hand it to them. It helps everybody to do it. Okay, now we're just going to let her rip, as Robert says, which means speak things that you're either thinking about or questions that you have, either just your favorite idea or something. And I'm going to pass the mic around. There's not time for long sermons. Give us quick ideas and thoughts. Let's go ahead. Make sure this is working. Check 1, 2, 3.
I like
And go closer.
about our church is that it's open to the neighborhood. There's not a fence around the property. The paths could be better aligned to wander, like you say, around the church. But I think it's nice that we keep it open and welcoming.
So it's not fenced off, it's open to the neighborhood. Great. What else? Don.
Since we do use the parking lot at Colonial Vista, I wonder if they would, especially if we were paying for it, if they would be amenable to us doing something about the graffiti wall, like making it more attractive. Maybe there's a wall that, like with living stuff on it, so that graffiti wouldn't be on the wall all the time.
I think there's two things you do at Colonial Vista, both what you're saying, and you do something formal with them about using their parking in a permanent way. Because it is true that it's nice having parking here, but both with street parking and a giant parking lot next door not used, how can we use that better? Rachel.
Okay, Nancy, I'm not going to contradict you, but I'm going to say this. I feel that the coffee area is, for us, too open and uninviting. It needs to be more enclosed and welcoming. We need more defined spaces and whatever in there. However, I have something else to say here. I'd like seating for small groups to gather under the shade, plantings along the perimeter to define the space, instead of it feeling like it extends to the street and traffic. Maybe meaningful symbols incorporated, can't even read my own writing, incorporating the landscape as signs of faith and hope. But here's the thing, I thought, could we then also, with the development of this, send out flyers to our neighbors and say this is a welcoming space, a space for quiet, reflection, connection, friendships, conversation. So we're not building a perimeter to block them out, but rather to welcome them in. So I get your point, Nancy.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes.
So with that too, sorry, really loud. With that too, Rachel, I love that, welcoming in our neighbors, and we're in such this unique space right here in South Wenatchee that I'd love some of the things in our garden, like along those, the cement whatever, where there was a verse done or something like that, that some of it would be in Spanish. I think that would be really cool to invite our neighbors in.
Great idea. Sarah.
Something that I don't like is the parent area over here has separated people, I think, from, fellowshipping with us. On the other, I know you're shaking your head, yes, but you might not like the next part. I don't feel like we need a designated kid area. I think it's okay to build an environment of respect and reverence without having a specific kid area.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you. Thank you. Susanna.
I'm going to piggyback off that because I'm the young family delegate here. It is so isolating for us parents over there watching our kids, wanting to be fellowshipping, but also wanting our kids to be able to enjoy each other. So somehow seeing safety, I think, is the biggest thing, where especially when our kids are over here, my toddler will run towards the road. But I also don't like the idea of it being fenced. So all of these, there are all sorts of things. And water features. The moment you said water feature, my heart went, I will take wet children home every day if there are water features. And that's terrifying as well. So there we go.
Water features that turn off and on.
Yes.
So that when I go towards it, it turns on, and when your kids, no.
This is so fun and exciting to think about, but a couple thoughts I have is I want to make sure we're remembering that we have some people in wheelchairs and some maybe elderly people, and so just I love thinking that there would be built-in places to sit and that, you know, that we could make it more accessible in terms of people in wheelchairs. And then also I thought how cool it would be if there was some kind of a built-in table type thing where the whole coffee snack situation would just be so much simpler, and I could imagine us using it in all sorts of ways and just, yeah. So those were my thoughts.
A big common table that could be used for coffee, could be used for godly play, could be used for community eating. You know, it could be a really practical thing. Maybe it's undercover, maybe not. But I think that we've heard that from quite a lot of people today. That a bit more of some permanent infrastructure, as it were, for being outside would be really useful.
Yeah, and we all know, I think we all can agree that we need more shade, and there's would be a lot of beautiful ways via trees or built-in over coverings that could help with that. Yeah.
Shade. Rachel.
And piggybacking on you, Susanna, I wonder about maybe a low wall or something around where it's clear that it's still open, but that kids would have, a real sight barrier where they're not as likely to run into the road, because we do have a lot of little kids. As a parent who's had little kids run into the road from here, just so that they understand that there's an area that they stay inside of. But I still really like the open feeling, but something that's low enough that it still feels open, but is high enough that it's a little bit of work for them to get over, or at least they understand not to.
You need to be able
Go out
to
of it.
see that your children are out.
Yeah, and
that they're
sight
not
is a
invisible
huge thing
behind the
here.
planting.
It's really a huge thing.
Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of them running around.
Merrick and then Jessica.
I was just gonna say, like, from a building maintenance perspective, just having something that's fairly easy to maintain. We don't know how big of a team and what specialties we'll have, you know, in the future. So something that can be maintained by anyone and doesn't take too much effort.
And things that are flexible, I think, as well. So things that could be used for different purposes. So you're not, you know, we don't know what you might hold and what you might want to do in the future with those spaces. So flexible, easy to maintain spaces, I think, is what we're looking for, that can work on lots of different levels at different times for different people.
Any other thoughts before I keep going?
Nope.
Claire,
Thank you.
no.
I enjoy visiting cemeteries and churches that have cemeteries. That Herefordshire was beautiful. Made my heart sing. I just, and I don't think we'll be able to have one here, but having a space where we have like a memory garden or something where we can put a, you know, a plaque of a loved one or, you know, dearly departed friends, that we can go and sit and remember. I think that would be a lovely thing.
Maybe a shady garden on the north side would be a good place for that.
Lael and then Pepper. And then Elliot.
Yeah, what you guys have got a lot going already. I know somebody said they'd like to have an inside coffee shop, but I just enjoy coming and seeing all of you folks outside. I think it makes people think, wow, that's an exciting church. They're having a good time, and they're like a big family get together. And so when that coffee outside, to me, gathering more, you can show your activities, even a good neon, not neon sign, but a reader sign that tells what's going on in your church that you can change from the office and stuff. But I'd really like to see you folks out in the front yard.
And Lael, imagine if it wasn't just Sunday for an hour or two, but if there were times throughout the week that for some reason that gathering place was a happening place. And what's going on there?
I'm relatively new here, but I guess the thing that strikes me is the south entrance the main entrance to this church, or is it the east entrance?
Yeah, that entrance over there.
Because the east entrance is very uninviting to me, okay? And the south entrance, I just walked in just now for the first time. And so that area of the church is quite nice.
Yeah. And that was the original entrance.
Right.
That was how they first came in.
So I think what we need to focus on, I guess is my point, is the east entrance, so that when people come, and especially new people and things, it's really inviting.
Yes.
However we create that. I'm not good at creating it, but that's...
I'm curious how many of you warmed to the idea or were troubled by the idea of, if the entrance is through that back door, and not just from a parking lot, but from something of a green space, losing some of the first parking places, did you all say, no, hold on to the parking? Or did you think, yeah, how can we make that more green on that side? Okay. Yeah, I see mostly almost everybody nodding, but tell me later if you feel differently and why.
Yeah,
Anna.
I was thinking if we really look at the parking spot back there, there's probably a lot of wasted space. There's a lot of extra space, so maybe we could just create that green space quite easily and then squeeze the cars together.
And you can extend the parking lot more that direction by building a retaining wall against the sidewalk. So what we lose here, we could gain there if we needed, or even out to the right towards Colonial Vista, if we need to keep parking at all. I wonder if there's another way to not have that be 6 days a week, an empty parking spot. So keep wondering about that. The right-of-way is one of the challenges. So it is true that there's a right-of-way through the parking lot to the alley. So that would need to be maintained. But we've already begun to wonder, okay, with that limitation, what could we do? There is a city requirement for the number of parking places, but they've also said to us, given your other options, let's talk about what that should be. Exactly. We'd have to have something formal with Colonial Vista. Let me just do Elliot because he's been waiting. And it is good to say your name because we're still getting to know each other.
I'm Elliot, and this is my wife, Annika. And we're able to pull it up on maps, and you can really see that Colonial Vista and just how massive, how much square footage they have on that parking lot. And it's just like, man, why do we have this massive tarmac when we have all this stuff that's available? And we always park on the street. But also that kind of undeveloped garden along Malaga on the east side could use a little bit of love, and there could definitely be a little bit of better flow between the parking lots right now and that south garden. And also definitely piggybacking off, I didn't catch your name, but
Pepper.
Getting Pepper. That's great. I'm looking forward to talking to you in the garden sometime. Getting this fire escape on the west side, somehow, if we are able to plant some trees on the south side and get it a little bit more hidden away, because it is pretty uninviting. But I see why they put it on the east side, since that wasn't the original entrance. But And Annika's going to say something.
I'm Annika. I guess I'm thinking a little more vaguely in terms of height and texture, because everything seems very one level right now. So I think playing with height could be an interesting aspect of it. And then also, we have winter for quite a long while. And so I think the idea of plants that are, I don't know, strong enough to hold snow, because I think that can create a really interesting sculptural space. So, yeah.
So like those lime trees created a green architecture, could snow-covered, naked branches still be strong enough for some kind of a... Joe?
So, Joe, I'm thinking of landscapes in terms of the sound. And one thought is the beauty of the bells in ways that something that might draw to or participate in the sound of the bells.
To say, what do you imagine?
Another
So
thought
guys,
is the traffic noise, which was mentioned. There are types of glass that mitigate sound. They're used in cities and large buildings, and it can really remove the sound of airplanes and other things. Could some of that type of glass be on the windows near the roads and therefore significantly reduce sound?
Great idea.
Interrupt this broadcast because some of our youth who are about to start youth group, I've asked to come in, and you guys can come all the way down to the front. So what we've been talking about is what to do with the outside. And you guys are going to stand right up here like a choir. Dun, dun, dun. And I'm going to interview you just real quick on what do you like and not like about the outside? What are things that are working out there that you like about the outside? And then, what do you imagine if you could do anything with, right through there, the grass around the sign, right out here, the kind of hidden garden, and the parking lot? Especially if we didn't need as much parking lot spaces, what would you do with that giant piece of land out that way? Even if there's not answers, I want you to chew on these things and tell me with time. But does anybody know from the beginning what you wish we could do, or what you like about it or don't like? And somebody grab me the mic. Thank you, Valerie.
Yeah, don't hold back.
Daniel.
I think it would be cool to have like a field out there, so then we don't have to go down to
Methow Park.
Methow all the time, because the field down there is also kind of small, but it'd be cool because you can park on grass too and stuff. So it'd be cool to have like a multi-purpose field kind of out there.
Great idea. Anything else? Clara?
It's very bare and exposed, it feels like, and so it would be interesting if we had like some trees or like garden that would kind of enclose the space. I think that would be beautiful and functional.
Amen. Both. Yes. Yeah. Anybody else with a thought or idea or question for Robert and Claire? You watch Claire writing everything down. These are their pictures because they're taking all this with them in a couple days back to England. Anything else? Merrick, just shout it out. Should be a landscape architect. What a fun idea. Okay, anything else? Micah?
Maybe for like after church when like all the kids are running around, there could be like some different like mini games like badminton or like bocce ball, kind of along just some of the bare area that isn't being used?
Games would be a great way to do something. Even the spot right outside Carson and my office, which is a long, skinny grass spot, could that be boules or badminton or something? Because games, not just on Sunday, but throughout the week, would be super fun. Great ideas. Anything else?
This was from Noah, who was here and now has left, but he wrote, having the story of the Bible or Jesus' life on a path somewhere. So maybe the church calendar somewhere represented could be cool.
Cool.
Great idea.
Great. Okay. Just linger for like a few more minutes while we listen to a couple more things. Yes, Jim.
I've mentioned this before to Robert and Matt, but if you even look at the picture up there of the church, the barrier right there against the sidewalk closest to us, nobody comes out there, at least we adults don't. I mean, it's too close to the busy Okanagan, and if there would be some way that, I know well, Annika mentioned different levels, which I would love to. I would love to see somehow some of that sunk with a nice railing all along there, but it would allow you on perhaps the lower level, depending on how much lower it is, to come right up to that barrier and not feel like you are right on the road. And so that much more of that space could be utilized. And again, moving forward, I've mentioned it before too, if there were a way that that whole area could be sunk a ways, you could open it up straight to the basement and have much more light come into that dark, dismal basement area right now and access in and out. So anyhow, that's...
I think we've often manipulated levels, sometimes for practical reasons, such as you're describing, but also just because I think in an urban context like this, even if you just go down a foot or two, it creates lots of things. It creates a space that feels slightly separate from the road. It creates that sort of feeling of being a little bit more enclosed. It creates a step or two that people can sit on as a kind of social space. It creates potentially a performance space. And it just creates a bit of topography, which can, if you imagine kind of mounding on the outside and then coming down into a sort of amphitheatre space, it just makes you feel a little bit more enclosed and enveloped in the space, not like you're on display on a street corner. So I'm sure we would want to look at that and think about levels and whether there's something clever we can do to do that sort of sunken garden thing in a simple way that opens up those sorts of opportunities.
Okay, and before I hand this back to these wonderful young people, is that a bus stop? What is that right there?
That's our bus stop.
So people come and go on that bus stop?
Every day. Come sit with me at the bus stop. It's a great place to meet people. Okay. Yes, Valerie, thank you for letting me take it, and now it's back to you.
That's all right. It'll just take a second. Back to the gathering, play kind of space. Can we have a burn pit somewhere?
Barbecue pit?
A burn pit.
Burn pit. Place for fire.
Place for fire.
So we're thinking about water. How about fire?
There you go.
Very good. We're going to have flames, fountains. It's going to be so fun.
Looking at these youth up there, I also think in 10 years we're going to have 40 or so teenage boys in our church, if not more. And I don't have an answer, but what it looks like to have 40 teenage boys running around our yard every Sunday, we need to think future.
If that parking lot was the most playful, fun place to gather, not just Sunday, but the 40 boys and girls who want to play, that would be where I would hang out. You'd get me out of the office real fast. Jessica.
Some kind of what we might call a multi-use games area on that car park could work really well.
Yes.
It can double up as a car park if you have a big event that needs lots of car parking. But other times of the week or the day, you could mark it out for basketball or whatever, and it could it could play double duty, serve double duty in that sense.
So multi-use was the term. How could there be multi-use instead of just pavement for parking on Sunday?
I just want to echo what Karen was saying earlier about accessibility and making sure, talking about that sunken area, just making sure that it's accessible. I'm not getting any younger, and I'll speak only for myself, but I like the idea of ramps, nice slope areas where we can come and go easily.
Great. Completely. Okay, I'm about to let the youth go. Is there anything else you'd like to say to our teenagers? Teenagers, any other ideas you have before youth group starts? Know this, we're really trying to imagine what could make you really want to hang out here. Not just because you like me and want to be with me, but because this place and the geography and the land makes you say, I want to go there. That's what we're trying to figure out. And if you can help us with that, with the ideas that you come to, even good ones you've already had, keep them coming. These guys are listening. The whole congregation's listening. Jim wants a zip line from the tower down. Great. Yeah. Yeah, they know it. And we won't be here too much longer. You will be not up here. You'll be sitting here with your kids saying, what do you guys want? So help shape it even for your own. Okay, thank you, teens. Thank you for letting me have you ask questions. Sure, Rachel, we can give them those papers as well. Okay, I want to take 5 more minutes, and then we're going to have an end to the night. You can stay and linger and keep talking, but let's take 5 minutes to wrap up. Is there anyone who hasn't yet spoken, who has something? And then I want the final words to be with Robert and Claire on what you've heard, what you think, and what you want for us. But first, from anybody in red chairs, what remains? Linda.
Well, when we did the play area out here for the kids, I wanted trees planted there and benches and, tables for people to sit on. And there is a stairway that comes up from the basement, and there's a window there and a window well. And I thought if we could take that window out and make stairs come up to that little playground area, it would really be neat because the kitchen's down there and could fix things for the kids. We could have all kinds of picnics back there and stuff.
It's a good idea.
Well, I've been listening to all your good ideas, and I think there's wonderful things. And one of the things that popped into my mind was having a tree strip through the parking lot so that you would get shade, you would get a softer parking lot, and trees take a long time, but you could have a beautiful kind of extension of the gardens if you made a strip through the parking lot. It wouldn't have to be huge. And of course, the perimeter of the parking lot is another thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Claire or Robert, final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we often talk about what we do as landscape architects as place making, and I guess what we're trying to do here is make this place even more special than it is already, and to celebrate the building through its landscape, make those connections from outside to inside. And I just want to thank you for all those amazing ideas and thoughts that very much chime with other things that we've been thinking about. and some great ideas there that we will go away and think about and hopefully come back to you with a plan that synthesizes it all into a coherent landscape that, as I say, celebrates this amazing place and makes it even better. But thank you all so much for that. It's been a great 2 days. We're assimilating information really quickly, so thank you. You've made our job much easier.
Could we give a little applause to Claire and Robert? And then, Linda, would you close us in prayer if you're willing to do that? Yes? Hold on.
Our Father, we thank you for giving us this time this evening that we can come and just think of what we can do to make this a beautiful, welcoming place. We thank you for each person that is here, and we thank you for all the ideas that we've had. Go with us and bless us, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.